On Mother's Day, my daughter gave her mother-in-law a $20,000 ring and a cruise. I got a $5 plastic flower and a note. The next day, she called me 28 times. Please, Mom, don't sell the company. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I'm 67 years old, and I thought I'd experienced every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. Mother's Day started like any other Sunday. I woke up in my empty house, made coffee for one, and tried not to think about how quiet everything had become since Harold passed 3 years ago. The silence used to comfort me, but lately, it just reminded me of all the conversations that would never happen again. Ophelia had called the night before, her voice distant and formal. Mom, we're having brunch at David's mother's house tomorrow. You should come. 1 o'clock sharp. Should come. Not, we'd love to have you, or please join us, just an obligation disguised as an invitation. I arrived at Patricia's house precisely at 1. The driveway was already full of expensive cars, and I could hear laughter spilling from the backyard. Patricia had always been everything I wasn't: polished, social, effortlessly elegant. Her house looked like something from a magazine, all white marble and fresh flowers. When I walked through the gate, I saw them gathered around the patio table. Ophelia sat beside Patricia, their heads close together, sharing some private joke. My son-in-law David was grilling, acting every bit the devoted son Patricia had raised him to be. "Colleen!" Patricia called out, her smile perfectly practiced. "So glad you could make it." Ophelia looked up and gave me a quick nod. "Hi, Mom. You can sit over there." She gestured to an empty chair at the far end of the table, away from the main conversation. I sat down quietly, watching as everyone chatted about things I wasn't part of. David's sister was there with her children, Patricia's bridge club friends, even the neighbors. Everyone seemed to belong except me. Then came the gift exchange. "Oh, Patricia, we have something special for you," Ophelia announced, standing up with an excitement I hadn't seen from her in years. David appeared beside her, carrying a small velvet box and an envelope. Patricia gasped when she opened the box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, the kind that catches light from across the room. "Ophelia, honey, this is too much. It's not too much for the woman who raised such an incredible son," Ophelia gushed, hugging Patricia tightly. "And there's more." The envelope contained cruise tickets, 2 weeks in the Mediterranean, first-class accommodations. Patricia actually started crying, and everyone applauded while Ophelia beamed with pride. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. $20,000. At least. Maybe more. "And now for Grandma Colleen," David said, though his voice had lost some of its enthusiasm. Ophelia walked over to me, carrying a small gift bag. Inside was a plastic flower, the kind you'd find at a dollar store, and a card that looked like it had been grabbed from a drugstore rack at the last minute. I opened the card. The printed message said, "Happy Mother's Day," and underneath, in Ophelia's handwriting, "Thanks for everything, Mom. Thanks for everything." Like I was the cashier at a grocery store. The table went quiet. I could feel everyone staring, waiting for my reaction. Patricia cleared her throat uncomfortably. Even David looked embarrassed. "It's lovely," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, dear." But Ophelia had already turned back to Patricia, launching into an animated story about the cruise destinations they'd chosen. The conversation moved on without me, and I sat there holding my $5 plastic flower, feeling smaller than I had in years. I stayed for another hour, watching my daughter lavish attention on a woman she'd known for 12 years while treating me like an afterthought. When I finally said I needed to leave, Ophelia barely looked up. "Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe." The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking about that ring, those cruise tickets, the pure joy on Ophelia's face when she gave them. When was the last time she'd looked at me that way? When was the last time she'd put thought into anything she gave me? I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, staring at that ridiculous plastic flower. 43 years of being her mother, and this is what I was worth. A last-minute afterthought from the clearance aisle. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene, wondering where I'd gone wrong. I'd built a successful company from nothing, employed dozens of people, contributed to my community. But somehow, I'd failed at the one thing that mattered most: being worthy of my daughter's love. I got up and walked to my home office, where I kept all the important documents: financial statements, tax returns, business contracts, everything that represented my life's work. And that's when I started to wonder, what exactly had I built all of this for? The sleepless night turned into a sleepless week. I couldn't stop thinking about that plastic flower, about the way Ophelia had looked at Patricia with such genuine affection. It ate at me like a physical ache. I decided I needed answers, not the kind that come from confrontation or dramatic conversations, but real answers, the kind hidden in bank statements and old receipts. I spent the next Saturday in my office, pulling out filing cabinets I hadn't touched in years. Harold used to tease me about being a pack rat, keeping every document, every receipt. "You never know when you might need proof," I'd tell him. I never imagined I'd need proof of my own motherhood. The first file I opened was labeled Ophelia College. Inside were tuition payments, room and board receipts, and dozens of smaller expenses I'd forgotten about. Books, a laptop, even parking tickets she'd gotten on campus. $47,000 total, not including the car I'd bought her junior year when hers broke down. But that was just the beginning. I found the folder marked Wedding, O&D, $58,000 for a single day. The venue, flowers, catering, her dress, the photographer. I'd insisted on paying for everything because I wanted her day to be perfect. David's parents had contributed a case of wine. Then came the house files. When Ophelia and David got married, they'd wanted to buy a home in the exclusive Riverside district. Their combined income wasn't enough for the mortgage on the house they wanted. So I'd co-signed. Then, when David's business hit a rough patch 2 years later, I'd quietly taken over the mortgage payments for 6 months. They never knew. I'd made sure of that. The car payments were next. 3 different vehicles over the years, each one just a loan until we get back on our feet. Somehow, those loans never got repaid, and I never asked. I'd just quietly absorbed the payments into my monthly expenses, but it was the emergency fund that really got to me. In 2019, David's landscaping business had nearly gone under. He'd made some bad investments, trusted the wrong people. They were facing bankruptcy. Ophelia had called me, crying, begging for help. I'd transferred $85,000 that same day. No contracts, no payment plans, just a mother helping her child. They'd bought the boat 6 months later. I sat back in my chair, staring at the calculator display. Over the past 15 years, I'd given or spent nearly $400,000 on Ophelia and David. College, wedding, house, cars, business bailouts, and countless smaller expenses I'd stopped tracking years ago. $400,000, more than most people see in a lifetime. And yesterday, I'd gotten a plastic flower. The really painful part wasn't the money. I'd made good investments over the years, built a successful consulting firm. I could afford to be generous. The painful part was realizing that my generosity had become invisible to Ophelia, expected, taken for granted. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text conversations from the past year. Her messages were brief, functional. "Can you pick up the dry cleaning? David needs to borrow your truck. The kids need school supplies." Always asking, never offering. Never a random, "How are you, Mom?" or "Thinking of you." But Patricia got cruise tickets and diamond rings. I found myself opening my laptop and looking up the mortgage on Ophelia's house. Still in my name, of course. The payments came directly from my business account, automated years ago so I wouldn't have to think about it. That business account. I pulled up the monthly statements and started going through them line by line. David's lawn service maintained the grounds at 3 of my commercial properties. I paid him 30% above market rate, though I'd never mention that. Ophelia's part-time bookkeeping work for my smaller clients brought her $1,200 a month for maybe 6 hours of work. They weren't just my daughter and son-in-law. They were my dependents, adults in their 30s who'd structured their entire lifestyle around my financial support. And somehow, I'd become the villain in their story, the distant mother who didn't understand them, who couldn't relate to their lives. They'd painted me as cold and disconnected while living off my generosity. I closed the laptop and looked around my office. Photos covered the wall. Harold and me at various company events, awards from the Chamber of Commerce, newspaper clippings about business successes. But there were no recent pictures of Ophelia and me together. She'd stopped wanting to take photos with me years ago. The clock on my desk read 4:30 p.m. I'd been going through documents for 8 hours and the picture was painfully clear. I'd spent years trying to buy my daughter's love, and all I'd accomplished was teaching her that I was a source of money, not affection. My phone buzzed. A text from Ophelia. "Mom, David's truck broke down. Can we borrow yours for a few days?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'll think about it." It was the first time in years I hadn't immediately said yes. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my attorney. Monday morning, I sat across from Margaret Chen, my attorney for the past 12 years. Her office overlooked downtown, and I could see my own building from her window, a reminder of everything I'd built over the decades. "Colleen, you look tired," Margaret said, settling behind her desk with a cup of tea. "What's on your mind?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head all weekend, but sitting there, the words felt heavy. "I want to discuss selling my business." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Hartwell Consulting? But you've spent 30 years building that company. It's your legacy." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "I need to understand what would happen to my family if I sold." I watched Margaret's expression shift as she realized this wasn't a casual inquiry. She pulled out a legal pad, her professional mask sliding into place. "Walk me through your concerns," she said. Over the next hour, I laid out everything I'd discovered. The mortgage payments, the business contracts, the web of financial dependence I'd unknowingly created. Margaret took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but her face remained carefully neutral. "So, if you sold the business," she said finally, "David would lose his primary commercial contracts, Ophelia would lose her bookkeeping income, and they'd need to qualify for their mortgage independently." "Exactly." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Colleen, can I ask what prompted this? Last time we spoke, you were talking about expanding the business, maybe bringing Ophelia in as a partner. I told her about Mother's Day, about the plastic flower and the diamond ring, about years of feeling like an ATM with legs." Margaret listened without interruption, though I caught her wincing at certain details. "I see," she said when I finished. "And you're thinking of selling as a way to find out who my daughter really is," I said. "Right now, I don't know if she loves me or my checkbook." Margaret nodded slowly. "There are ways to do this gradually. We could restructure your business arrangements, maybe transition some of the financial support over time." "No," I said firmly. "Gradual change gives people time to adjust, to find new ways to manipulate the situation. If I'm going to do this, it needs to be clean." We spent another hour discussing the logistics. Margaret had contacts in the business brokerage world, people who specialized in consulting firms. She estimated the process would take 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly we moved. "I'll need complete confidentiality," I said. "No one can know until the sale is finalized." "Of course, but Colleen, once you do this, there's no going back. Are you prepared for how Ophelia might react?" I thought about that plastic flower sitting on my kitchen counter. I'm prepared for her to show me exactly who she is. That afternoon, I started making subtle changes. I called David's landscaping company and told them I was considering switching to a different service for my commercial properties. "Budget constraints," I explained. "I need to get competitive bids." The panic in his voice was immediate. "Mrs. Hartwell, we can negotiate. Maybe lower our rates." "It's not about the rates, David. It's about exploring options." Next, I called my smaller clients who used Ophelia for bookkeeping. I told them I was restructuring my referral arrangements and they'd need to find new services within 60 days. Professional, businesslike, no personal explanations. Ophelia called that evening, her voice tight with worry. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you're not referring bookkeepers anymore. Did I do something wrong?" "Not at all, dear. I'm just simplifying my business operations. But I need those clients. That's my income. I'm sure you'll find other opportunities," I said calmly. "You're very capable." There was a long pause. "Mom, Is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. I'm fine, Ophelia. Just busy with some business matters. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at that plastic flower. For the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Control. Not the kind that comes from writing checks or solving problems, but the kind that comes from making your own choices. The next few weeks fell into a routine. I met with potential buyers, reviewed financial statements, and gradually disentangled the threads that bound my business to my daughter's lifestyle. Margaret handled most of the legal work, but I insisted on being involved in every decision. The hardest part was the secrecy. I'd never been good at keeping things from Ophelia, even when I probably should have. But this felt different. This felt necessary. 3 weeks into the process, I got a call from David. Mrs. Hartwell, I heard from someone at the Chamber of Commerce that you might be selling your business. Is that true? My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. People gossip, David. You know how it is. But if you were selling, you'd tell us, right? I mean, it would affect our contracts. If and when I make any major business decisions, you'll be informed appropriately. That night, Ophelia showed up at my door. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back messily, wearing an old sweatshirt I remembered from her college days. Mom, we need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the living room. David's contracts, my bookkeeping clients, now rumors about you selling the business. What's going on? I sat down across from her, hands folded in my lap. I'm reevaluating my priorities. What does that mean? It means I'm 67 years old, and I'm tired of carrying everyone else's responsibilities. Ophelia's face flushed. Is this about Mother's Day? About the gift? I'm sorry if you didn't like it, but we've been really tight on money lately. I almost laughed. Tight on money while living in a house I paid for, driving cars I'd bought, working jobs I'd arranged. But I didn't say that. Instead, I just looked at her and said, "This isn't about one day, Ophelia. This is about understanding what really matters." She left 20 minutes later, frustrated and confused. I watched her drive away in the car I'd co-signed for, back to the house where I paid the mortgage. But not for much longer. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing the final purchase agreement. Margaret had found a buyer, a larger consulting firm looking to expand their regional presence. The offer was generous, more than I'd expected. My phone rang just as I was signing the preliminary documents. The caller ID showed my home number, which was strange since I was at Margaret's office. Hello? Mrs. Hartwell? This is James Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I'm trying to reach you regarding the acquisition of Hartwell Consulting. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, who is this? James Morrison. My firm is handling the due diligence for the purchase. I may have dialed the wrong number. I was trying to reach your office. You called my home number. Oh, I apologize. Someone answered and said they were your assistant. They gave me permission to discuss the details of the sale. I closed my eyes. Only one person had a key to my house. Only one person would answer my phone and pretend to have authority they didn't possess. Thank you for calling, Mr. Morrison. Please direct all future communications through my attorney, Margaret Chen. I hung up and immediately called my house. It rang 4 times before Ophelia answered. Mom's house, this is Ophelia. What are you doing in my house? There was a pause. Then her voice changed completely. Mom, I thought you were at some meeting. I just came by to water your plants. I don't have plants that need watering. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, fine. I was looking for something. David said you might have some old tax documents he needs. And you answered my phone because... It kept ringing. I thought it might be important. I could hear the lies crumbling in her voice. Ophelia, I'm coming home. We need to talk. The drive from Margaret's office to my house took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept replaying that phone call, the way Ophelia had pretended to be my assistant, authorized to discuss confidential business matters. The audacity of it was breathtaking. When I pulled into my driveway, Ophelia's car was still there. I found her in my home office, sitting at my desk with papers scattered around her. She looked up when I walked in, her face a mixture of defiance and guilt. Find what you were looking for, I asked. She gestured to the documents. Mom, what is this? You're really selling the company? I walked over and started gathering the papers. purchase agreements, financial statements, confidentiality documents, everything she shouldn't have seen. These are private business matters. Private? Mom, this affects all of us. David's business depends on your contracts. My income comes from your referrals. You can't just sell without talking to us. I stopped collecting papers and really looked at her. She was 35 years old, sitting in my chair, at my desk, demanding explanations for decisions about my own business. When had I allowed this to happen? Actually, Ophelia, I can sell my business without consulting anyone. It's my company. But what about us? What about our family? What about our family? I repeated the question slowly. When did you start caring about our family? Her face flushed. I've always cared. You're my mother. Am I? Or am I your bank? The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the sound of normal life continuing while mine fell apart. Ophelia's voice was smaller when she spoke again. Mom, if you're upset about Mother's Day, I already apologized. We can do something special next year. Next year, I said quietly. Like the year after that, and the year after that. Always next year when it comes to treating me with respect. I sat down in the chair across from my own desk, looking at my daughter as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Do you know how much money I've given you and David over the years? She shifted uncomfortably. We never asked you to keep track. $400,000. Not including the mortgage I'm still paying on your house, or the business contracts I've arranged for David, or the referrals that provide your income. Ophelia's mouth opened, then closed. She clearly hadn't expected me to have actual numbers. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, I continued. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. I've been subsidizing your entire adult life, and somehow, along the way, you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a resource. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked how I was doing, how I was handling your father's death, whether I was lonely in this big empty house? Her face crumpled slightly. Mom, when Patricia got a $20,000 ring and a cruise and I got a plastic flower, it wasn't about the money. It was about the thought, the care, the consideration. You spent more time picking out Patricia's gift than you did thinking about mine. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. But I couldn't stop. The words had been building up for years. You treat Patricia like family because she doesn't give you anything. You have to earn her affection. But me? I'm just expected to provide, to support, to enable your lifestyle without question. I love you, Mom, she whispered. Do you? Or do you love what I can do for you? She couldn't answer that question. We both knew why. My phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. The caller ID showed David's name. Don't answer it, Ophelia said quickly. I picked up the phone. Hello, David. Mrs. Hartwell. Ophelia told me about the business sale. We need to talk about this as a family. This decision affects all of us. Actually, David, it doesn't. It affects me. It's my business to sell. But our contracts, our livelihood. Your livelihood has been my responsibility for too long. It's time for you both to take care of yourselves. I hung up and looked at Ophelia, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Mom, you can't be serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. That's when she started to panic. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. Ophelia's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. By the time I finished my coffee, she'd called 12 times. I finally answered on the 13th call. Mom, please, we need to talk about this. We talked yesterday, Ophelia. I think I was quite clear. You can't just destroy our lives because you're upset about a Mother's Day gift. I set down my coffee cup, feeling that familiar anger rising. This has nothing to do with one gift, and you know it. Then what? What do you want from me? I want you to understand that I'm not your personal ATM. I want you to see me as a person, not a source of funding. I do see you as a person. You're my mother. When was the last time you treated me like one? Silence. Then, Mom, if you sell the business, we'll lose everything. The house, David's contracts, my clients. We'll have to start over. Yes, you will. And maybe that's exactly what you need. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, she called back. Then again. Then again. I stopped counting after the 15th call. Each voicemail was a variation of the same theme. Pleading, bargaining, threatening, manipulating. She cycled through every tactic she'd learned over the years. Mom, please call me back. We can work this out. Mom, David's having chest pains from the stress. Do you want to put him in the hospital? Mom, I'm sorry about the flour. I'll make it up to you. Just please don't sell the company. Mom, everyone's going to think you're being vindictive and cruel. Is that really how you want people to remember you? By noon, she'd called 28 times. I knew because I'd started keeping count, each call a testament to her desperation. She was finally understanding what I'd been trying to tell her, that her entire life was built on my generosity, and I was tired of being taken for granted. The doorbell rang at 2:30 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Ophelia standing on my porch, her eyes red and swollen. David stood behind her, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. Mom, please, Ophelia started immediately. We need to talk about this like adults. We tried that yesterday. You weren't interested in talking. You were interested in accessing my private documents and pretending to be my assistant. David stepped forward. Mrs. Hartwell, with all due respect, this is affecting more than just you. We have a family to think about. So do I said quietly. I have to think about what's best for my family. And right now, what's best is for all of you to learn to stand on your own feet. Ophelia's face crumpled. Mom, I'm begging you. Please don't do this. You're begging me now. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner that wasn't a holiday obligation? When was the last time you called just to say you love me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. We all knew the answer. I thought so, I said. You only call when you need something. You only visit when you want something. You only care when you're about to lose something. David's anger finally erupted. This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for being successful, for building a life together. Successful? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. David, you're 37 years old and you've never made a mortgage payment on your own house. Ophelia's entire income comes from work I arrange for her. You call that successful? We call it family, Ophelia said, her voice breaking. Families help each other. Help goes both ways. Ophelia, what have you done to help me? What have you contributed to this family besides taking? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ophelia looked at David, then back at me, searching for an answer that didn't exist. I gave you grandchildren, she said finally. No, you didn't. You moved 3 states away and visit twice a year. I haven't seen Tommy and Sarah in 8 months. Her face went white. Even David looked uncomfortable. You want to know what family looks like? I continued. Patricia's family calls her every week. They visit without being asked. They remember her birthday without being reminded. They give her thoughtful gifts because they pay attention to what she likes. That's why she got the ring and the cruise. That's why she's treated like someone who matters. Ophelia was crying now, but I couldn't stop. Years of hurt were pouring out. I spent 30 years building a business so I could provide for my family. I wanted to give you security, opportunities, a better life than I had. But somewhere along the way, you stopped appreciating what I gave you and started expecting it. You stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. Mom, please, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll be better. You're sorry because you're scared, I said. You're not sorry because you understand what you did wrong. David grabbed Ophelia's arm. Come on, we're wasting our time here. She's made up her mind, but Ophelia pulled away from him. No, wait. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, genuine vulnerability. Mom, what do you want from me? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 35 years old, crying on my doorstep, finally asking the right question, but it was too late. "I want you to figure out who you are without my money," I said. "I want you to learn to value relationships that aren't transactional. I want you to understand that love isn't about what someone can give you. And then what? If I do all that, will you change your mind?" I shook my head slowly. "Ophelia, I'm not selling the business to punish you. I'm selling it to free myself. I'm 67 years old, and I want to find out what my life looks like when I'm not responsible for everyone else's choices." I stepped back and started to close the door. "Mom, wait!" she called out. "I love you. I really do love you." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "I love you too, Ophelia. That's why I'm doing this." Then I closed the door and listened to her cry on my porch for the next 10 minutes before they finally drove away. The sale would be final in 2 weeks. 3 months after the sale closed, I was sitting on the porch of my new cottage, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. The house was smaller than what I'd left behind, but it was mine in a way the old house never had been. No memories of failed expectations. No rooms that echoed with disappointment. The move had been surprisingly easy. 30 years of business files, contracts, and correspondence all boxed up and stored away. I kept only what mattered: a few photos, Harold's favorite books, and the quilt my mother had made when Ophelia was born. The cottage came furnished, which suited me perfectly. I didn't want to drag the past into this new life. The previous owners had left behind simple, comfortable furniture and a garden that needed tending. I'd never had time for gardening before, but now I had nothing but time. Ophelia hadn't called in 6 weeks. The silence hurt, but it also brought clarity. I'd spent so many years measuring my worth by her approval, her visits, her needs. Now I was learning to measure it by my own peace of mind. The business sale had provided more than enough money for a comfortable retirement. I'd set up a trust for my grandchildren's education, money they'd receive directly when they turned 18. With no strings attached and no parental access. It was my way of ensuring they'd have opportunities without enabling their parents. I'd also quietly paid off the mortgage on Ophelia and David's house. Not as a gift, but as a final severance. They now owned their home free and clear, but they also knew they'd never receive another penny from me. It was the last check I'd ever write for them. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID, Susan, my neighbor from across the lake. We'd become friends over the past month, bonding over morning walks and evening glasses of wine. "Colleen, are you free for dinner tomorrow? My son and daughter-in-law are visiting, and I'd love for you to meet them." "I'd like that," I said, and realized I meant it. Susan's relationship with her children was everything mine had never been. Natural, reciprocal, built on genuine affection rather than obligation. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked down to the dock. The water was still, reflecting the last light of day. A family of ducks paddled by, the babies following their mother in a perfect line. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Ophelia. But it was from Margaret, my attorney. "Thought you'd want to know. David's landscaping business filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Ophelia's looking for work at the elementary school. How are you doing?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm doing well. Thank you for letting me know." I felt sadness for them, but not guilt. They were adults who'd made choices. Now they were learning to live with the consequences, just like everyone else. A loon called across the water, its haunting cry echoing off the hills. I'd never heard that sound before moving here. There were a lot of things I'd never experienced while I was busy being responsible for everyone else's life. Tomorrow, I was starting a pottery class in town. Next week, I'd signed up for a book club. Small things, but they were mine. Chosen because they interested me, not because someone else needed me to do them. The strangest thing about this new life was how light I felt. For years, I'd carried the weight of other people's problems, their poor decisions, their financial struggles. I'd thought that weight was love, but it wasn't. It was enabling, and it had hurt us all. Real love, I was learning, sometimes meant saying no. Sometimes it meant letting people struggle so they could grow. Sometimes it meant walking away so they could find their own strength. 6 months later, I got a letter. Not a phone call or a text, but an actual handwritten letter. The return address was Ophelia's, but the handwriting was different, more careful, more deliberate. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've been trying to write this letter for months, but I never knew what to say. I kept wanting to ask you to come back, to fix things, to make everything the way it was before. But I finally understand that the way things were before wasn't good for any of us." I set the letter down and took a deep breath before continuing. "David and I are getting divorced. I know you probably heard about the bankruptcy, about me working at the school. It's been the hardest year of my life, but also the most honest. I had to learn who I was without your money, without your safety net. I had to figure out how to take care of myself. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I'm writing to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for treating you like an obligation instead of a person. I'm sorry for all the years I wasted being angry at you for things that weren't your fault. I understand now why you sold the business. You weren't punishing me. You were freeing both of us. I just wish it hadn't taken me this long to see it. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me. Family isn't about what you can give someone or what they can give you. It's about showing up, paying attention, and caring about someone for who they are, not what they can do for you. I hope you're happy. Mom, I hope you found the peace you were looking for. You deserve it. Love, Ophelia. P.S. I kept the plastic flower. It's on my kitchen windowsill, and every time I see it, I remember the look on your face that day. I remember the moment I realized I'd broken your heart. I'm sorry it took me so long to care about fixing it. I sat on my porch for a long time after reading that letter, watching the sun set over the water. Then I went inside and wrote a response. "Dear Ophelia," I began, "thank you for your letter. It means more to me than you know. But I didn't mail it that day, or the next day, or the next. Some wounds need time to heal completely before they can be reopened safely. Some relationships need space before they can be rebuilt on a foundation of truth instead of obligation. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to each other, but for now, I was content to be free. Free from guilt, free from manipulation, free from the exhausting job of trying to buy love that should have been given freely. I was 67 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was living my own life. It was enough. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.